Welcome to another episode of Historic Marker Monday. This is where we all talk about those little markers that you see around Key West and the stories that are behind those markers. And sometimes we start talking about how Key West has changed and gives you an opportunity as you're exploring the island to say, this is what it used to look like. And see if you can imagine it looking like that. So today, we are doing a little place different. We're going to the outer mole. So if you're not familiar with Key West and you haven't been into Key West on a cruise ship, or you haven't seen one of the larger cruise ships dock at the outer mole, this is going to be a whole new thing for you. So hold on. It's at the end of Southern Street, and there's a big, long concrete pier out there, and that's the outer mole. And this place has seen it all. It used to be wooden docks, and then it was upgraded so that it could be a place for submarines and Navy ships and the Coast Guard cutters. And now, like I said, it's a place where the larger cruise ships come in and dock. So let's talk about all of this. Before you go out and check out the outer mole today, let's see and try to imagine what it looked like before. This outer mole is a solid concrete breakwater and it juts out into the harbor. But before that was built, this was a wooden dock, and it was built before the Civil War. Go back to 1845, and the U.S. Army builds Fort Zachary Taylor. And this was a defensive fortress, and it was meant to protect Key West and the Gulf. And this is something wild. When you go to Fort Zach today, it's all connected to Key West. Back then, it didn't sit on the shoreline like it did today. Nope. It was actually 1,000 feet offshore. And it was connected to Key West by a wooden causeway and a drawbridge. So it was actually a fort that sat out in the water and had a drawbridge and a moat all the way around it. And it sat on a small piece of land, and that land was called a cover face. I don't know, it's an old military term, but the land that the fort originally sat on was called a cover face. And that cover face extended with a wooden dock, and that dock is what historians call the original outer mole. So it's the mid-1800s, and you're wandering around in Key West, and you have the smell of coal and the wooden ships that are creaking in and out of the harbor, and sailors that are shouting orders, and this little pier connecting the fort to Key West. This was a lifeline for bringing the supplies and the ammunition and maybe an occasional bottle of rum to the fort. So as the years roll on, and we know this, technology changes, and so, of course, does Key West. Around the turn of the 20th century, the Navy began to expand their operations in Key West. And engineers then began to fill in those shallow waters around Fort Taylor, and they used dredging material that was once so they turned this sea fort into something connected to the land. So suddenly, this fort wasn't on an island anymore. It was part of the growing naval base. And by the end of World War I, the Navy wanted to transform Key West into a submarine base. And those wooden docks that were part of the original outer mole just weren't going to do it anymore. And they needed something stronger and a structure that would protect ships from the waves and also give them a place to tie up. Thus, the mole pier was created. It's part dock, it's part breakwater to protect the island and the harbor, and this thing means all business. So construction on the new outer mole began after World War I. And the engineers used concrete filled with sand and marl, and they dredged that from the seabed to create this massive structure that you see today. Today, the pier is about 580 feet long, and it has a deck height of about 7 feet above water. And it's strong enough to handle ships that are up to 855 feet in length. And that's the size today of a modern cruise ship. And so the outer mole then became the heart of Key West harbor defenses. And it's a deep berth pier, and submarines and destroyers could dock safely behind that concrete wall and be protected by the waters and the harbor. During the early and mid 1900s, Key West Naval Station was booming. And a lot of you who were stationed there or part of families that were stationed there tell me all the stories about how Key West was during that time. Submarines and warships came and went, and the outer mole was right in the thick of it. So what's interesting is you guys start telling me stories about your second, third, fourth, fifth generation conchs, and I hear all these stories of how the naval station was and how it was during that period of time. And I love hearing those stories. And then you start to follow the evolution of how the Navy and that naval station in Key West expanded and did what it did over the years. And there are people there who served still in the later years, not obviously in the early 1900s, but in the later years. And it's interesting just to hear all of that impact. But keep in mind that Key West, even today, but back then especially, it just wasn't a place that you parked the boat and anchored your ship. This place was a strategic shield. It had a thick wall of concrete, and it broke the waves, protected the ships, and it made it easier for the ships to come in and refuel and supply themselves. And during World War II, this base played a major role in the coastal defense and training missions. Key West became a crucial Navy hub for anti-submarine operations, which makes sense when you remember just how close Key West is to Cuba and the Gulf and all those shipping lanes. So we're going to fast forward now to 1986, when the Navy sold off most of the old Navy station property at a public auction. But they kept one very important piece, the outer mole. So that's still owned by the Navy today. And the Navy uses it along with the Coast Guard and NOAA, and it is used for the official docking of the vessels. So that's pretty cool, huh? Because the pier is technically on Navy property, if your cruise ship docks there, you just can't get off the ship and stroll into town. You have to hop on a shuttle and get escorted through the base area. So that's why, if you've ever wondered why, if your ship or you see all those shuttles out at the outer mole, that's why. This is still considered Navy property, and they just can't exit the ship and wander into town. If your cruise ship parks at Mallory Square and docks at Mallory Square, you can exit and then wander off because that's public property. The city of Key West leases the outer mole to allow the cruise ships to come in there. Usually that's where the larger ships come in because of it's less intrusive to the waters around Key West. It's made for the deeper water and the larger ships. So you just know now, if you're on a cruise ship and it's going to be docking at the outer mole, you're going to have to take that shuttle. So let's fast forward to today. The outer mole, like I said, serves as part military pier, part cruise terminal, and it's one of the 3 docking locations in Key West for cruise ships. But it's definitely, like I said, the most restricted because it still sits on naval land. The city of Key West, again, leases access for cruise ships, and when there's no military vessel in town, you'll see all those larger cruise ships sitting out there. And so when you go to the end of Southern Street and you're looking toward the Ingham, that's exactly where you're going to find this historic marker, the outer mole. And it's a reminder, I think, of how small the island is and was, and how through naval operations and other needs, it was expanded. But it always carried its own weight, if not more, in history. So one day you might see a NOAA vessel sitting there. Another day you might see a Coast Guard cutter sitting there. You might see a cruise liner there. You just don't know what and who is going to be docked there. There is a cruise ship calendar under the City of Key West website. And if you go there, you can see what ships are going to be in town and usually where they're going to be docked. As we move forward, and we're always talking about how Key West has evolved, and these markers show that evolution of Key West. The outer mole is the perfect example of this Key West evolution. It went from fortress, connecting a fortress to the island, and now it offers a place for cruise ships to dock. It started off, like I said, as a wooden dock. It supplied Fort Taylor before the Civil War. It had the drawbridge, and then it has to be rebuilt, and it's built into this massive concrete breakwater protecting submarines during World War I. And now it's the gateway for visitors arriving to explore Key West. That's over 180 years in one continuous place in continuous use. It's evolved in how it was constructed, but it's still there. It's still being used. So I think if you look at it, the outer mole connects Key West's military history to its current tourism industry. And I think that is really cool and how it plays that role very well. So as you start wandering around Key West, be sure to check out these historic markers. They may not be just a house. It may be an outer mole. It may be just a marker of something that happened there that maybe isn't evidenced by a physical structure. But be sure to check these out. There is a story behind every one of these markers. So today we dove into the history of the outer mole pier. It's not glamorous, it's not fancy, but it's really cool if you go visit Fort Zack and you're sitting there realizing, and you can still today see evidence of the moat, but that fort actually sat, like I said, 1,000 feet offshore. And because of what the Navy needed that outer mole to do and to provide protection for, and as it evolved and technology evolved, that moat that connected, that water that, was able to keep that island separate for the fort had to be filled in, and you can see that today. And then that outer mole was reconstructed and is still in use today. I invite you, if this is something that you love, and I've heard from many of you that you love Historic Marker Monday. It just brings Key West to life. The people, the stories, and how Key West is so integral and is an important part of all of the history of the U.S. and the part it plays in maritime history and American history, all of that. And there's so much more over at FunInKeyWest.com. There is more about this self-guided historic marker tour over there and more to come. I'm doing some updates. And so I don't want to just stay tuned. It's going to be really fun. I think you're really going to like it. And then be sure to check out more of those spots over there. Be sure to sign up for our happy hour list. That gets you in our newsletter and lets you then be in the know of what's happening with Fun in Key West, as well as what's happening in Key West. We are now starting in November, and so the holiday season is going to start coming in, and the lights are going to be going up in Key West. I will be broadcasting live from Key West in a couple weeks, and stay tuned for that. If there's something in particular you are looking to see or check in on, be sure to let me know. And we are having a meet and greet, so be sure to check out our Facebook page for more details about that. And if you're going to be in town on November the 22nd of 2025, be sure to stop by and say hi, and then we'll see where that goes. We're probably planning a meet and greet, depending on how well these go, about every quarter. But I'd love to be able to meet all of you and say hi and learn more about what you love about Fun in Key West. If you are part of our book club, thank you so much for being part of our book club. We have just started a new book. Be sure to check that out and be part of the conversation over on our private Facebook page. And if you're wanting a little bit more of a VIP attention, be sure to sign up for our chapters and cocktails. There you get a digital magazine every month that includes recipes, mocktails, cocktails sometimes. It also includes a Spotify playlist and some extras that revolve around the book that we are reading that month. And there's some more things that are brewing and I'm working on to probably launch either the end of this year or first part of next year. With that, you guys have a great Monday. Thank you so much for stopping in while we explored these historic markers. I love it when you stop in. I love it when you say hi. I love it whenever you reach out and ask questions or just say, hey, thanks for so much for all the information, or just, hey, hope you have a great day. Because I hope you have a great day. Enjoy your Monday, and we'll talk to you later.